moderator for today's panel presentation. The session will last around 90 minutes, the last 30 of which will be the chance for you, our online audience, to ask questions of our distinguished panel of 3 experts that I'll be introducing shortly. So please do use the chat function to ask your questions throughout our discussion, and I'll attempt to get through as many of them as I can during that final half hour. So I'm going to begin in a moment by offering a brief introduction of our topic today, just to set the scene. Then I'll introduce you to our 3 distinguished panelists. During the first hour, I'll ask them a series of questions concerning the way forward for the private education and training industry in Malaysia. Then, as I said, audience, it's your turn to grill them. What I hope is that this will be an interesting, informative, and inspiring session, and it's one that I'm certainly looking forward to. So what are we here to talk about? It's been said that catastrophes can change the course of humanity. And because I like to think there is a silver lining in any cloud, perhaps COVID-19 will finally impact the education sector in ways that will better prepare young people for the workplace of today, let alone the future. Whether private or public, from K through 12 or universities, COVID-19 has resulted in schools, higher education institutions, and training centers having to shut down for many weeks. Faced with this new reality, such institutions have been forced to make fast technology choices to support this change. From collaboration platforms to network resilience, the choices made now will impact workflow, processes, and expectations for our future post-COVID-19, while the economic implications of reduced budgets and revenues will dramatically change fiscal planning. This will produce a real need for educational institutions to prioritize their technology spend and projects. With this sudden shift away from traditional classrooms, some are wondering whether the adoption of online learning will continue to persist post-pandemic, and how such a shift will impact the global online education market, which is projected to reach $350 billion by 2025. With the surge in the use of language apps, virtual tutoring, video conferencing tools, and online learning software since the onslaught of COVID-19, everyone in the education space is affected: teachers, lecturers, students, and administrators alike. Questions now being asked include, given the need for a global digital transformation in education due to the pandemic, will educational institutions be willing and able to accelerate processes and workflows that need to be more agile, flexible, and remote? And how can the private education industry in Malaysia, in particular, take the golden opportunities, presented by the current crisis and further enhance the country's involvement in the global private education value chain? All of which and more we are here to discuss today. So now let me introduce you to our 3 panelists. Our first panelist is Mr. Mohammed Ali Haja Maidin. Mr. Mohammed Ali is the CEO of the Penang Skills Development Corporation, PSDC, and the chairman of the Federation of Malaysia Skills Development Centre, FMSDC. He has been actively involved in various Industry 4.0 initiatives since 2016 that support the new phase of industrial revolution in Malaysia. PSDC and FMSDC focus on addressing the industry-relevant skills mismatch in technical and engineering nationwide. Thank you and welcome. Thank you for joining our panel today, sir. Next, we have Mr. Amir Hamza Mohammed Isa. He has been the president of the Association of Bumiputra Private Higher Education Institutions, Malaysia, since 2015. This national association comprises 47 institutions of higher learning that are privately owned 100% Bumiputra, holding all three forms of license, from college through university colleges to full university status. Mr. Amir Hamza has over 25 years' experience in the education sector, specializing in private higher education, skills training, and professional certification, as well as being involved in employment consulting work. Since 2012, he has been the chief executive of Unity College Port Dickson, a board member of Unity Kota Baru College, and a board member trustee of the Unity Foundation. He is also director at a Unity company offering competency training and professional certification, as well as consulting in the halal and information technology industries. Mr. Amir Hamza is the founder of Virtual Halal School, a learning and knowledge sharing initiative that was launched in June 2020. So grateful that you could join our panel today, sir. And next, I am delighted to introduce a lady who wishes simply to be known as Teacher Zaliza. While working as an English lecturer and as the mother of 4 young children, Teacher Zaliza Alias discovered the need for an English medium Islamic school with quality teachers, syllabus, curriculum, and facilities in Malaysia, and thus ventured into the realm of preschool education. This is how she came to found Genius Aulad in December 2000, I apologize. She is also the founder and executive director of the Gains Education Group, one of the most reputable education groups in Malaysia, with a whole range of international and national schools institutions, from preschool, primary and secondary, teachers academy, and education infrastructure services. Teacher Zaliza is also an education consultant for young children's animations and creative content creations. I think those are wonderful contributions to the development and future success of our young people, Teacher Zaliza. So welcome to the panel. So let's get started on the questions. Let's discuss the present first, the present short-term measures that can help to mitigate the impact of COVID to your industry. Mr. Mohammed Ali, let me start with you and ask, what do you consider to be the most pressing challenges and opportunities for digital training and education in Malaysia while we continue to fight the effects of this pandemic?
Thanks, Liz. That is a very challenging question. And it should be asked last because I have a lot of content on it. Okay, challenges and opportunity, right? Let's look at it in this perspective, right? What happens when this pandemic is over? Currently, we are all addressing the issues, right? What will happen? How we need to transform? First scenario is everything will go back to before, like what we have pre-pandemic, which is face-to-face classes. So the institutions of the private learning institutions will face the same challenges as what they were facing before, which is in the area of they will be running it as a business because unfortunately private institution in Malaysia another setup of a business entity, even though the intention of doing it was to educate, but since the structure of private institution as a business, it will go to run as a business as before, and the challenges will be the same. That will be the first aspect. And as one of the key things that as a business entity structure in Malaysia, there will be a lack of government support. That is one perspective. If after this COVID, things start to change, people, the government and the public, adaptive to what they're going on. So then there will be another new challenges. So things like how the institution is going to adapt to the new norm. So which is mean that in the context of the challenges, if the society and the government adapt to the new norm, the institution will have all the previous challenges, which is still same, and new challenges in terms of adapting to whatever things are coming. That we can name the long list. The infrastructure, the online delivery. At the moment, all the institutions are giving haphazard solution, which is they have to form it. When 18 March 2020 is actually my birthday, we start to shut down. It's basically, everybody trying to find whatever. So there's no structured way moving forward. So that will need to be a bigger challenge, or I would say the biggest challenge for them to address. Then in terms of second, type of challenges is actually will impact on the future, students, because the students which has been exposed to this unstructured transformation to online, kind of blended from before face to face to this. So we do not know how they will behave. And one of the key things that institutions, especially private institutions, will be looking, facing a challenge, how to encourage them to study, how to encourage them to go for the knowledge. So this is totally unexplored at the moment because whatever we have now is previous. So this is in terms of challenge. But you are right. There's always a silver lining. There's an also opportunity. The opportunity for the centers is, firstly in operation expenses, because there is no need for you to have the infrastructure, classroom, labs, everything to be ready in the first time. So there are some potential cost savings and improving, your operational expenses or reducing it. And also in terms of also a kind of a capex and opex investment in terms of having the trainer or the lecturer or the teacher to do the training. Now, you can have an option to engage them when you need them. So again, another cost improvement structure. And you can also have the right people to be engaged in order to deliver the program. So these are the two categories in terms of challenges and opportunities I see for our industry to face. I don't want to be specific into A, B, C, D type of challenges because that is pretty much people can think about it. But I would like to put it in the context of a bigger perspective. What are the major challenges that our industry are facing? Yeah.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Such a lot to unpack there. And I know that we will be coming back to some of those points as we continue our discussion. But let me turn to you, teachers, Eliza. How are the industry players that you represent in the private K through 12 education space adapting to the new norms of education?
Thank you very much, Liz, and good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone who's watching. I'm representing the basic education from preschool, young little ones, the primary school and secondary school private education. Okay, let's ponder about this. When was the last time we get our children, as a family, look at the blue sky outside our home? And are we now just let the laptop screen replace that, looking at the blue sky? Now, this is the simple sense of how tricky adapting to the new norms. Adapting is all about balancing between the technology and humans. And I believe for us, we should begin with humans first. Teachers are amazing creatures in adapting. I tell you, they're really amazing. We are amazed at how fast they can adapt to online teaching, video production, animations, and all. Imagine preschool teachers. Preschool teachers are, we call Cikgu Tadika, engineers outlet preschool. They could produce 120 video series in 3 months' time for their children. Imagine in our Sekolah Rendah Tinta teachers, they could organize 8 school community, it's a community virtual events in 2 months' time, besides their daily full-fledged STEM lessons every day, like full-fledged as in from 9 to 3 every day. So there's lots more. Imagine Idrisi International schools, teachers conducting the IGCSE Cambridge exam classes, it's a big exam, classes throughout the whole year of uncertainties and challenges, and then emerge as top achiever school in Malaysia, besides several other awards that they won in Asia. So all these happen during adapting. There's a lot that they can achieve, that teachers and students can achieve actually during adapting. In adapting to new norms, let's remember that learning is a journey. It's not just a destination. It's not just a product. It's a process. Learning is about values learned, not just about the results. Children of all ages, especially young children at their development stage, who build themselves as human. Let's look at the national education philosophy, Falsafah Pendidikan Negara. There are actually 4. There should be just money, that is physical development, emosi, socio-emotional development, rohani, spiritual development, knowing oneself, and intellectual development 4. So when we look at adapting to new norms, we should be very careful not to miss any of these elements in the students' development. We need to be careful not to disconnect them with what matters most while busy connecting them with online learning. You see, online learning, it's just a tool, it's just a vehicle, but learning goes on as usual. This is the philosophy in our Gains Education actually. The children's connection with themselves, connection with the family, so they have their responsibility with family, they are at home anyway, and connection with the world around them with all their senses, hearts, and mind. So how do we adapt with the new norms? In all this, as you can, as I've shared, we look at the human first, means to ensure that nurturing and educating humans comes first, and technology as a tool, as a vehicle, right by the humans. So if we want to nurture future thinkers and creators, then we have to start from building the humans. So hope that answers.
Thank you so much, Teacher Zaliza. You've said everything that you probably saw me nodding away there. Absolutely agree with everything you say, and that's a wonderful, uplifting message about the how teachers adapt. Yes, that's part of what they do. I mean, that's why they are so valuable in our society. Mr. Amir Hamza, let me relate the question I have to you to something that Mr. Muhammad Ali said earlier about the opportunities for operating expenses and the potential for cost savings. Let me drill down a little bit more and ask you, given the financial and cost constraints facing during this pandemic, how does your organization prioritize its spending? I mean, are you undertaking austerity measures, or do you think it's more important at this time to increase investment in preparation for moving post-pandemic?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Liz. Assalamualaikum and very good morning to all. Firstly, I would like to thank Mike for giving this platform to me and PKIPM. It's a privilege for us to have our voice heard this round. So, as we know, education is a service industry. And for most institutions, 70% to 80% or even more than that of our income come from the student tuition fees. I mean, we get the income from tuition fees. So last year in 2020, most of the private higher education institution or PHEIS experienced around 40% to 60% declining numbers of new student enrollment. Some institutions are even worse. I mean, I will get to know certain institutions doesn't have any new enrollment for last year. So definitely we are having less income. Number of new students is not enough to replace, or far less to replace the student that graduates for that year. Not only that, certain group of existing students also not be able to pay the fees. They ask for deferment, they ask for discount, and because their parents or their family affected in the pandemic, they lost jobs, reduced in income, or closing the business. But at the same time, running the institution, the cost of running institution is, I believe, for last year still remain the same, or even increasing, because this is unprecedented event which we are not really prepared for that. So we have to adapt to the new norms, as what Dr. Ali mentioned before, go to online and digital learning. But this online and digital learning doesn't come just like that. We need to invest. And one more thing I want to add. The cost structure or the cost of running the institution, 60% to 80% come, in the segment of paying the salary or the talents, because we are service industry. And then at least 60 to 70% of our staff are the academician or the lecturers. So we can't simply reduce the cost by terminating our staff or our lecturers, because the teaching and learning is still going on. We still need to hire and to engage with them. So back to the question about prioritize the spending or looking into the investment for this challenging time. I would say we will focus on few things. Above all, the business must go on. We need to deliver. We need to conduct the learning and the teaching and learning for our students. We need to pay salary for our staff. We need to maintain the goodwill of the institution. So the first thing we need to do, and we focus on the spending, is to enhance the capabilities to conduct this online learning. It comes to develop the digital learning ecosystem. Even though most of us do think and plan to have this digital learning ecosystem before, but this pandemic accelerate the planning. So we have no choice. We need to spend to invest in the technology, be it the equipment or the tools, the subscription to application, additional storage to increase the connectivity, to improve the security, and so on. So this is the most important segment that we do when we need to adapt to the new normal, which is online learning. Certain institutions go further. They develop their own learning platform, and be it the LMS, learning management system, or eventually the open learning platform. So, of course, as Dr. Ali mentioned before, the opportunities arise. Yes, we have less number of students physically, but if we do correctly and develop the things, I think we can capture a different level of market. And then we also need to spend or focus on the spending on the training and retraining, because adaptation to new technology, new skill sets, our lecturers or our staff might not be familiar before with the pedagogy of online learning, for example. So there are needs of reskilling, upskilling the staff, even the lecturers, to adapt to the need, because we don't want to reduce the quality or the offering to our students. even though we are not communicate physically. The other things regards to safety and health. We focus on providing safe working environment to our staffs, adherence to the SOP and the requirement imposed by the authorities. Same goes to our students, safety and health. And the other thing, I would say that we might need to have a new talent that vice versa is IT, technical support, to support the new uh, ecosystem of learning in the higher institution. So I think that's all for the moment. Mr. Liz.
Thank you very much for that. Mr. Mohammed Ali, let me come back to, let's focus again on this funding issue. As Mr. Amir Hamza just said, you must sustain. You know what I mean? That there's no way round throwing one's hands up in the air and saying, you know, we give up, we give in. And funding is a major issue here. Do you see the private education industry, how do you see it changing its business model? And how to adopt new technologies with, as you said earlier, you know, the potential of lack of government support and incentives. How do you see that happening when you're going to have to do more with potentially less as student enrollments decrease and less government incentives?
Okay, that's again quite challenging questions. It's going into fundamentally what's happening. You see, before I answer the question reversely, you know, lack of government support, you mentioned the word. And then what are the things that we supposed to look at and do to address these particular issues? Let's look at, you know, the scenario of this education system that what we have. Education that what we have during this pandemic is the least care of the government, to be said, because you know, they are the first one to be shut down, and you know, we can't practically do any activities into that, even though student must progress from year 1 to year 2, year 3, year 4, must progress. Everyone knows that, because if there is no progression, there is no workforce, right? But unfortunately, they will be shut down first, and then they will be the last one that will be given an opportunity to operate, right? Comparatively to other so-called essential services, manufacturing 60%, you know, there's a whole concept of looking at this is, in my personal view, need to be improved, because you can't actually allow some sector to work, and in the sector that assure the future, you don't actually look at it. We don't talk about, you know, the lack of government support now. I'll come back to that in a while. But let's look at overall the education industries. The private education, I'm not talking about the government, the private education industries. The government involvement into the private education institutions or industries is only into one category, which is I can think of, which regulations, you know, so that you produce the right quality. For academic, you have NQA. For skills, you have JPK. This is about the government involvement. What are the other things government involved in empowering private sectors? Are they providing some structured soft loans for them? Are they providing some, you know, benefits for them to improve the infrastructure? As person involved, chairing up 13 skill development centers nationwide and running my center for past 6 years, I couldn't think one. I couldn't go to the bank saying that, hey, I have these pandemic situations, right? I need to borrow a loan in order to do that. None. And look at the, you know, so practically on that particular area, there's none. I'm going to give you one example how the transformations of the private education system. In 2016, 17, government, I'm talking about the fourth industrial revolutions, you know, which is actually, it's a lot of knowledge. Who should give the knowledge? It's actually the institutions. But look at how the government structure is. They provide so much incentives for the public institutions under the government. I give you an example. every public universities are given, 500,000 to champion one pillar in Industry 4.0. And every public higher learning institution, technical, are given so much money to do, to transform. But what are the private sectors given? None. Even you don't talk about giving special one, you allow the private sector to participate in that activities even better. But that also none. Private sector is deemed as a business to be run. So these are our challenges. So, I can talk about the challenges, right? Because we are actually facing it. That's what has been told by teacher Zaliza and also Encik Amin. We are running a business to give them a service. That's about it. So let's look at how government should look at now, to empower. If you look at in many developed countries, right, the whole education systems are driven by the private sectors. No, countries that immediately looking into building up every year, putting up a budget to build more institutions, right? If they see more subscription, people apply for certain level of education, for example, diploma in electrical engineering, more people apply this year. How our government react? Okay, I need to open one more polytechnic because a lot of people apply. Current cannot. But the evidence says that you allow private sectors to address that issue. So one of the key things that what government can do to change the whole ecosystems of this private education system, empower them. That's what you're supposed to do. Whenever there is a demand, I give you an example again. We have 450,000 people finishing up SPM, right? And then maybe 200,000 will go into tertiary educations. If you see the demand go for tertiary education increase for another 10,000, you don't build your own institutions. You allow private sectors to build, to serve, and the government should look into buying places from this private sector. This will allow private sectors to grow. You don't have to simply tell, I give you this grant, I give you that grant. No, you do what the best thing that government can do, allow private sectors to drive and government manage and facilitate. That what they're doing into a business. Government, don't have a mobile phone factory, right? They allow private sectors to build a mobile phone factory because the private sector somehow seems they are able to do it in a much more better efficiency compared to rather government to form one company to produce private sectors. No. So they have to treat the same way. I would like to quote these things, the that capability, I agree with teacher Zalisa, the capability of, the educators, right, in private or public are huge. They are people with a lot of potential. What government have to do to empower them, to change your policy so that they can do their job efficiently and deliver. So these are the contexts that, if there's a one key takeaway from this particular questions, right? How should government comes in and transform the whole education systems? I would put it is actually in a one word that empower them. You do a government job is actually by facilitating as much as you facilitate telecom industries and all sort of things, let all the telecom companies to offer the services, you should take the education in the same way, allow private sectors to build and serve rather than telecom. One last evidence I'm going to give that in 90s, they are telecom department, which is because that wasn't a government service that government do as a department, provide utility. They are board of electricity utility that provide services government owned. But what government did, they allow private sectors to handle it. And we have a very efficient telecommunication system. We have a very efficient, energy system. The same transformation need to happen in these educations. And they can talk about whatever policies in order to do that, whatever infrastructure, is it soft loan, whatever they're going to give it will come later. Fundamental change into a policy that empowering private sector will be adequate at the moment. That's all.
That's wonderful. Now, teachers, Eliza, I have a question for you, but I noticed that during Mr. Muhammad Ali's discussion there, you were giving us the thumbs up. Is there something that is there something you would like to add or reiterate to what he just said for the sake of continuation?
Yeah, it's along that line actually for your next question. So that's why I was like, yeah, you nailed it. Yeah.
So shall I just ask you the question, or
Sure,
do you have
sure,
something
yes.
else? Yes.
I'll add to that later. Sure.
Okay. So if we're talking about digitalization transformation efforts and the ones that are undertaken by your organization, we're always talking about looking towards 2030 or 2050 with new offerings, particularly around education technology. So what are you focusing on in your business to ensure higher levels of digital skills among your students and educators?
Right. I guess the key word in your question here is digital transformation, right? No, actually, I don't see it as digital transformation, nor do I see it as education technology transformation, not transformation, but I see it as an opportunity to make the biggest reset of education. Reset, to press the reset button. To reset means to look at education as a whole new perspective, a new purpose. This is the best time actually to reset. A new design and blueprint. We cannot reset education if we still talk about the same thing. We talk about new norm, but we actually look at we look at everything the same way. For example, we look at the final pathway or roadmap of basic education. It's all about when is the final exam, when is the SPM, when is it going to be postponed. These are like, it means we just talk about the same thing. Even at preschool level, if we still talk about readiness, why you send your children to preschool is about readiness for primary one, entrance, assessment to the best primary school, blah, 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 then we can't reset education if we still, look at that. We can't talk about digital transformation and all that if we still look at that perspective. Children's development is very holistic. It's more than just literacy achievement boxes. You know what I mean? So the very basic needs here, the children's education, there's a report in 2019, a total of 424,000 children in Malaysia were found to have mental health problems and may worsen in bouts of lockdowns in 2020, 2021. As we are expecting online learning is happening at home for the children, abuse cases are reported with physical abuse as the most common, 55% seen, followed by sexual abuse, 34%, neglect, 10%. This is very alarming, right? This is very alarming. When we talk about education, it's not just about the lesson, but we have to look at the whole development and what's happening. So it is responsibility of every government to uphold the rights of children for proper care and education in the country. Surveys shows that most parents are too busy to be there with their children. Of course, we understand because they are also busy with working from home. Imagine if they have 2-3 children, more than that, younger ones and older ones, how do we attend, how do they, juggle with all that? Children's education should be seen as an essential entity if we want them to be future technology creators by 2030, 2050, as you mentioned. It has to be seen as an essential entity first, and not to leave them vulnerable, attended as users. Because when we leave them unattended like that, they are practically using technology as users, not as creators or thinkers. And worst case, to be as victims. As Mr. Muhammad Ali mentioned just now, do we see children's education as being essential? In fact, we don't see care for children as being essential. they are the first to be closed and the last to be open. You rightly mentioned just now. Last to be open. So if the whole country, in fact, whole world, and suddenly adapt to new norms of education, we are, in March for our country, we are suddenly put to adapt to new norms of education. Now, if we can adapt to that and we can take that, why don't we take the opportunity to revisit what matters most for the children? What support is crucial for education, not only for the needs of the children, but what support for the parents? What are the support for teachers? And when I say here, I mean for both private and government schools. It's not just support for teachers for government school. The teachers, there are lots of training, but it's often offered for Guru Arus Perdana, that means for mainstream education or for mainstream schools, government schools. But for private, we are left to plan on our own, which is fine, but it requires, it has a lot of budget involved, cost involved there, and in this crucial time, on top of all that, we are also put with high taxes, right? There is no reduce that. So support for operators, too many ministries, we should revisit this too. Support for the operators. There are too many ministries, local authorities requirement. Imagine how much we have lost in the bureaucracies. Due to bureaucracies, we have it is made as very difficult for the operators. We are not in the business of looking at all these bureaucracies. It's supposed to facilitate us, but instead it's making more difficult for us, especially in this difficult time, right? So not to mention if we are, we fail to abide to certain things, due to the bureaucracy, we might receive penalties. So we are here struggling to nurture and to adapt with all this. But on top of that, we also have to face with all this. So that's why I mentioned we have to take the opportunity to reset, to revisit everything. And when we talk about transformation, it is about the reset. So support for the private and government is very important here when we look at it, to better support each other to build the education for the country. If we can take the opportunity to reset education now, then this pandemic will be the best thing that happens to the country for 2020, for 2030, 2050 and beyond. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Again, a lot to unpack there. Let me jump to a future question because Mr. Amir Hamza managed to preempt the next question I was going to ask. So rather than go backwards, let me go forwards here because I absolutely agree with everything you say, teacher Zaliza, but it just seems to me that it's hard to reset human psychology. And I read in one of the newspapers that in a survey that the number one most important thing to students and people today was the opportunity to earn a good salary. So they're looking for the money. So let me ask you this, and Mr. Amir Hamza, I'll start with you, but anybody can add to this. A key part of education and training, the value chain, is market demand. Whether that's employers, a support for entrepreneurs, or to bolster the gig economy. It always seems that as far as existing education is concerned, which is why we need the reset, that education and training programs are not always aligned with the needs of the labour market. There's this disjoint between the institutions and the business and industry that want to take those students on and give them a good salary. So how, Mr. Amir Hamza, how do you think we can achieve a more synergistic approach between government and industry to overcome that? What are you doing specifically within your institution to make sure that at that level, as well as upskilling and reskilling, that market demand is getting what it needs.
Thank you, Liz. Before I answer the question, can I make a bit comment on what Dr. Ali mentioned before?
Yes, please do.
Yeah. I would like to concur the point regards to lack of government support. We are not saying that government didn't support, but lack of government support. I would like to share some data. For the past, I think, 30 years, private higher education institution has been self-sustained, self-sufficient, and contributing to the nation through providing places for higher education in the ecosystem. We have, in 2018, we have 1.3 million population or total enrollment in higher education. And 50.3% of it is at IPTS or private education. I mean, half of it, more than half of it, 661,000 students from 1.3 million students in higher education are in IPTS or in private higher education, without government spending any cent in terms of development. And for the record, private higher education total asset or total development is worth 15.8 billion. We have 440 private higher education currently. And annually, we spend about 7.4 billion in expenditure without government support, without government fund. So we provide half of the ecosystem. So I would concur the idea of buying places. I mean, this might involve policies or spending of government fund, but I think it's worth to look into it and looking at the contribution given by even private higher education or private training centers, or even the preschool or the private schools. So I think the model of distributing the fund, the government fund, not limited to the public universities and only, but also open to private higher education as well, or the private institution as well. Okay, so back to the question, Liz. Sorry for taking that.
Not a problem, not a problem. This is a conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, true that one of the challenges is to make sure that our graduate get jobs. I mean, get better paid, get the best paid ever. So this is, I believe, never-ending issues, and to coordinate between the industry needs or labor need with the education. But I believe for the past 10 years, lot has been done, but I believe it's not enough. For example, previously we have in private Ministry of Higher Education, we have what we call it CEO at Faculty program, which business leaders or CEO from multinational companies invited to provide mentorship to university students and to lecturers, as well as providing guidance to universities on matters such as curriculum development to ensuring the industry relevant. So there is one effort before, but this might be improved as time goes on. Second, the ministry also have what we call it 2U to I programs. 2 years in the university or the institution and 2 years in industry. So this is also a good program which to support the flexible education and to ensure students experience themselves what is happening in industry while they are still in the study. So the program called 2U to I. So this also is a good program that might be look back and how to enhance it again. And in practice, actually, for private higher education, every program that we offered, we need to have what we call it external assessor or external advisor. So we need to have one external advisor on academic matters and one external advisor on industry. So this is compulsory to every program that we offer. So for example, in my institution, I have 17 diploma. So I have 17 different external advisor on industry. So the function is to give feedback, input, engage with the student, engage the lecturer, so that the product, the graduate that we produce are able to, we are able to slim the gap between the one that we teach in the industry and the one that expected by the, one that we teach in institution and expected by the industry or the employer. So, but I mentioned it's a never-ending issues. But for us in private education, or even private training centers, this is, employment or employability is something that we really take care of it. That's why, in fact, government also introduced what they call it MyQuest and Setara. MyQuest is Malaysia Quality Evaluation System for private colleges. It's kind of rating system. And also Setara for university. So one of the component, that Setara and MyQuest look into is the employment. Or in fact, the last Setara and last MyQuest exercise, 50% of the evaluation emphasis on the output. The student employment, the feedback from employee, from industry, the satisfaction of the customers, what else? External scholarship given to student in the institution. So I think the system is already there. To make sure that the gap between the output from the institution and the one that what industry needs can be slimming. And maybe again at this pandemic issue, pandemic era, the question is not about jobs, I think, because jobs are getting less because many companies are closing down, change their model. So I think the graduates, the institution not only need to do what I said before, they have the external. We need to have more things that we embed to the learning system. Because to change the whole program is not easy because we are tied up with this policy from MQA and we cannot change the program more than 30%, for example. So, and then you need approval process to change the syllabus, to change the delivery and so on. But then I believe this can be supported by what we call it upskilling, reskilling, and along the way, we did improve our program, evaluate the program consistently to make sure what we offer in the institution are aligned with what the industry wants. So I hope that would answer the question.
Well, thank you. Now we've got about 5 minutes to the top of the hour, but I would like to invite Mr. Muhammad Ali. Obviously with the bio I read out at the beginning about addressing the industry relevant skills mismatch. I'm absolutely sure that you have something to add to this.
Yes, Liz, thanks. And also thanks to fellow panelists to highlight a few things. But the one that I looking at is slightly different. Let's identify the problems. Malaysia spends 21 to 22% of its national yearly budget on education. That's huge, right? We spend very less for our military, few percent, but compared to education, a lot. After spending so much money into education, but if you still see industry telling that your students don't have what it takes for me, and this saying is going on for so long, and every time industry says this, government pumping more resources, more money, and the outcome is still same, something wrong fundamentally, right? You keep on pumping in money, you keep on listening to the industries, the employer, you keep on adapting it, come out with so many different schemes, but the fundamentals is the same. So there's something wrong on the way that we had behaved. What we supposed to do, you see, industry must understand the responsibility of education institution is to give a knowledge for people to do certain things. It's not responsibility of education institutions to make sure their graduates go there to the industry and work according to what industry want. No, because that cannot be achieved because industry keep on changing their technologies, their deliverables, their processes. Every time they are changing. And how can the education institutions, can catch up with that? It's impossible. So every time you have a dialogue between institutions and industry and the government, industry will repeat the same mantra. Oh, your graduate do not know this, you suppose. No. You see, industry have to play their part. Industry cannot be a spectator over here. Come and tell it's a responsibility of the government for you to produce the graduate that I want. It's supposed to be, let me work with you. Let me tell you how I want my graduate, and then you give this fundamental knowledge, and then I will give the application knowledge. These are the methods that we can see has been adopted in some of the countries that look into education is very seriously by the industry, like Germany's. German look into their education systems must be industry led. You mean you are letting in the customer to decide what to be taught, how to be taught, and they involve into the whole processes. Comparably, if you have an kind of a come and a visitor kind of mentality, you keep on telling and you not enabling these institutions to go and support what you want. It is a kind of a scenario that you cannot address. So I would think that if we want to produce an employable graduate, the industry must participate in the whole education process. The government must change a policy to allow the industry to participate, because now the government policy also doesn't allow the industry to really participate. Government only invite the industry as somebody come and look into your syllabus and tell you this is good, but there is no process of doing it. With the industry must commit. And if we allow industry to commit and allow them to participate, allow them to dictate how, what, and to deliver the education, then there will be no noise from the industry. And both industry must understand that what are and clearly communicate to education industry, this is my fundamental that I want, the employee, the graduate to have. Because if you see that, there are a lot of countries have a great innovations. Let's look at US. A lot of great innovations. You see everything that in your table now, you're communicating is coming from US. Why they are enabled that? The US completely funding their own education system, giving in all sort of things. No, they facilitate. Industry take lead. Industry invests on the development. That what in the principle need to happen. Industry must play a part to make sure that the graduate, from the institution, to have fundamental knowledge, and they are willing to look into their talent that they are hiring as an investment, not a cost, so that they can continuously develop. It's like institution pass the talent, with certain fundamentals, and the industry should pick it up from there and start to nurture them in their workforce. So unless we found this synergy, whatever amount of money that we put into upskilling, reskilling, is just going to go to waste. Let me tell you this, PSDC and my federation members start to do upskilling and reskilling in year 2000. It's now 2021. More than 21 years, government is pumping in resources to reskill and upskill their graduates, which they already taught them for 5 years, 5 years, right? To meet industry. Something wrong. This is what that we need to address. How to address these issues rather than continuously putting in money into that, to come with a certain policy so industry are held accountable for the graduates that institution is going to deliver. That's all.
Thank you. It's the top of the hour and we're beginning to see some questions coming through, but I just want to squeeze in the interest of continuation. I'd really like to bring teacher Zaliza into this to follow on from the point you just made, Mr. Muhammad Ali. You know, we hear this term VUCA. Today's world is volatile, complex, uncertain, and ambiguous. Now, I'm a great believer that education and training needs to be more about how to think than what to think or even what to know, which speaks to what Mr. Muhammad Ali was saying, in the industry's needs are always changing. Just very briefly, teacher Zaliza, how do you produce future-proof graduates who are agile, adaptive thinkers for this VUCA world?
So this is again about it relates to industry-ready employability, right? In this VUCA world. I guess in the first place, when we talk about this industry-ready, we often miss to talk about how the readiness should begin from the root of the chain, the whole chain, from the very basic of the whole chain, the whole chain that is the basic education, early childhood education. I'm the advocate for that because very often, you know, when we talk about employability, we often talk about already in university level, higher education, not really so much from young. There are very much uncertainties, you know, happen at the early childhood itself. And when we don't really tackle the problem at the very root of it, you know, it goes to the next level and next level. I shared earlier how even at early childhood level, there are so many ministries overlooking at early childhood. There are about 4 ministries, agencies, local authorities. And all this, you know, as preschool, we have to go through, although by right, what we should be looking at is about how the intervention, how to improve on the education itself, on the content itself, on the training itself, rather than, you know, on the bureaucracies. We established Junior Saulat for 20 years. So you can imagine that was at the time when early childhood was not seen as something professional or serious or seen as industry, but we keep on taking it as a mission for children education beyond distance is a struggle. Then we, you know, establish our primary school, full-fledged STEM education school, because we want to produce natural creators and thinkers. What I'm trying to say is that we want to start that employability, that industry ready. We have to start from the beginning. We have to start from the school, from the young, early years, from the primary school, from the early childhood. The same when we established Eco School, Idrisi International School, it became one of the 5-star rating international school in Malaysia. But why we do that? Because we want the children, you know, we give an option to parents so that they will have an access to an internationally benchmarked and evaluated at international level, be in an inclusive environment. So, you know, to have all these options, alternatives, and be taken seriously at the very basic level. So to answer how's this missing link that you mentioned, I believe it is because we don't start from the root, the very basic of this whole chain, the basic education, preschool, primary level.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much. So let me jump to the questions. Our first one is from Mohammed Yusri Yusuf, who wants to know, what is your view after the end of the pandemic, that the method of learning will return to normal as before the pandemic, or whether online training and education will continue to be the main choice? Who would like to address that? Mr. Muhammad Ali, would you like to address that?
Oh yeah. Okay. It's a very early for us to decide what will happen. Why I tell you this? Because when early stage of pandemic, right, we adopted to be given online classes, a lot of things going on. And then we hope and we feel that whenever there's an economy open up, the industry would change into more towards that. They want to do more of online and then come only for practical sessions. But it is not. Industry immediately revert back to the previous situation. So there's one case that we have now. So actually, we do not know how the industry will behave. This is where we need government to come and put some policies. But to answer these questions, whether we will have to have a kind of hybrid kind of mode, I think there's a high potentials. The whole public and industry are very open for hybrid delivery, which is mean that you can have some online and you can have some face to face. So I think there's a huge potential. If everybody play their part, the whole industry can shift towards that. So this is where the possibility to make this sustain, because there's a lot of goodness into that, is government quickly to come with some kind of guideline or interventions to allow that to happen. It's very important because the current structure of funding, grant, loan, everything is towards the previous system. So, and government do a lot of flexibility adjustment during this, pandemic. So we do not know when we open up the market, so people can decide if the policy still says that you can do certain thing, claim and all sort of things. You have to follow the previous one, which is you have to have a lot of hours, contact hours, participation, all sort of things. Then the industry will revert back slowly. If government quickly come and put saying that okay, hey, I allow this to happen, even though previous policy says that in order to do assessment you can do this, now we can do online. Then there's a potential many private sectors will immediately jump into this and try to enhance it. So it's still very fluid to confirm which direction that it's going to go. But there's a potential.
Yes, maybe the future is this blended learning. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater when we can actually get back to meeting face to face. There are many advantages in that, but then use online learning where that seems to be the most sensible and supports other types of learning. Thank you for that.
Can I give my comment, Liz?
Yes, please.
Okay. Regard to question from Mr. Yusof.
Yes, Mr. Yusof. Yes, yes.
Whether this the method of learning back to normal after the pandemic. I think this is what the government need to decide, because when the pandemic happened last year, we at private higher education institution are given being able to conduct the online classes 100% to the student, which before because we are having what we call it a conventional license, means we cannot offer things online like what we are doing now. But because of the pandemic, because of the MCO, we are given permission or authority to conduct fully online classes until end of this year. So, but it happened that we can deliver that. I mean, we can do this fully online learning and teaching, and including the assessment for certain programs. Right? But of course, certain segments, certain discipline need to have, we call it the practical and the lab and the practical things. They need still to come today. So we already write to the ministry and MQA to allow us to have what we call it this ODL license instead of having conventional license. So we are expecting approval from the ministry and MQA to allow us to have this ODL license. Mean we can offer this program not only end of this year only, but this can be open after this also. I you mentioned about blended learning. I would say that would be the way forward, because of course, obviously, we still want students to come to our campus, and students also still want to come to the campus to experience the learning process, because we believe that education is not only about know the subject matters, but the experience along the way. I mean, through the learning process with the colleagues, with interactions, that will make a lot of difference. So I think this need the government to come to it. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Can I add, Dr. Liz?
Yes.
Okay. Even if pandemic is over, it's not totally, totally clean. It might be bouts of epidemic, might be, because there's variants and all that. So that is something that we should expect. What I believe is there should be an autonomy given to private education, an autonomy given to private schools, okay, so that we will not be subject to the blanket approach announcement for all schools, for government schools and for private schools. Why? Because the capacity and the SOP, the guides actually given for a private school to be open, the number of students in a classroom, for example, the size of the classroom, are different compared to the ones in the government school. So when we are subject to the same blanket announcement, it is difficult. Now, when we are given the autonomy, the way forward, how I see it, we should be given autonomy. It subject to strict SOPs, but strict, clear SOP. I have to emphasize the word clear. It's a clear SOP. That means it's not like too many changes, keep on changing. With that, I believe that with the autonomy given, the private school will be able to adjust and adapt, whether it's going to be hybrid, whether it's going to be physical or scheduled, small numbers, throughout the year, things like that. But at least will not be subject to the blanket announcement. And whether it's going to be the way forward, is it online? No, I believe that humans development, children, young children, they still need all the 5 senses to be activated. They need to jump and look at the teacher's eyes and friends and sweat and all those process and experience learning journey should still be there.
That's wonderful. We've got three questions. We've got just over 15 minutes, and I'd like to get to all the questions if possible. This one is from Kairunaja binti Mustafa Al-Bakri, who wants to know, how do you plan to empower your staff or teachers in adapting to digital learning? There's a lot of technology questions coming through. What kind of preferable training courses do you think should be used for training among staff and teachers to meet the Industrial Revolution 4.0? Mr. Muhammad Ali, let me bring you in on that. What would be your answer, quite briefly, to that question?
Well, I think teacher Zaliza has, superbly tell this when her opening, and also I confirm it, the educations, educators, right? The fantastic people. They are brilliant, right? If you allow them to innovate, they were able to innovate themselves, because this is proven when there's an abrupt shutdown. All these people that do not know how to do video recording, talking, and all sort of things are able to put their note, learn, unlearn and learn, and then deliver. So government should look into empowering the process, how this can be happen. So, talking about, is there any specific tools, trainings and all sort of things are tools. So if a kind of a policy or government can come that enable, I like the word that teacher Zaliza said, empower, right? That educators to decide what time to do, how to deliver, all the process, can be achieved, much more faster. Of course, there are many tools that, and trainings that they can embark to learn about Industry 4.0 and so on. But I would like to not name it each individual tools and so on because they are various. So it's better for me to just summarize that, there are a lot of things outside. Educators has proven that they are beyond the normal, level because they have to learn and teach. So allow that to happen by removing the glasses that have around them, and you can see things can move up very fast.
For that. I'm just looking at the next question, and this is from Abdul Manan Mansour. Again, it's talking about online education and the use of digital technology. Does that have, if this pandemic is going to be prolonged and we cannot get quickly to the blended learning, albeit taking into account what teacher Zaliza pointed out earlier about the private institutions, has online education the necessary quality to achieve learning goals? We always make the assumption, don't we, that everybody has access to the technology that they need, high-speed internet access. And I think you, Mr. Muhammad Ali, made the point earlier about the importance of encouraging students to study, and that's very difficult to do when you're doing it remotely. Mr. Amir Hamza, would you like to briefly comment on that? Do you feel that online education, if we're stuck with that in the near term, do you think it can still achieve the quality learning goals that we're looking for?
Yes, Liz, thank you. Thank you, Captain Manan, for the question. Captain is my colleague, actually. Yeah, this is the real challenge for us in private higher education, or even in public private higher education, in training providers, so on, is how to make sure this online learning achieve what we want to achieve. I mean, producing quality student, so-called like before. I believe this start with the leadership of the institution. I mean, we know we are in crisis. We know we need to adjust or adapt ourselves to this online learning, without compromising the delivery. So I cannot see a single magic word on ensuring this would be some kind of continuous improvement, continuous facilitation and advisory from the authority, in our case in private education, from the MQA, to set the standard, to make sure the compliance, and of course at the same time I think between the institution we'll also need to sit down together and look into these issues, and so that the whole industry is benefiting from this engagement with all of us, to make sure even though we are running things digital, online, without having face-to-face, without being interacting physically with the student, we can still provide the best education to our client or to our customers.
Thank you very much. So we're into the last 10 minutes. I've got one more question I want to ask. It's actually for you, Enchik Amir. It may be another one of your colleagues, who knows? But just before I ask you that question, usually in the last 10 minutes, it's up to me as the moderator to do a summing up. But I'm always a great believer that for all this talking, we need some practical, implementable solutions. So once Enchik Amir has answered this question, I would like to ask each of the panelists in turn to share one practical, implementable solution whereby PHEIs now and in the near future can best contribute to Malaysia's shared prosperity vision 2050. Just bearing in mind we've got less than 10 minutes. So here's the question, sir. Since many students are using hand phones for online learning, based on your experience, what is the effective time for students to learn via video conferencing? And that's from Kamal Harmoni. So, Encik Amir, if you would like to very briefly answer that.
I think this the correct time. I believe this need to be discussed between the lecturers and the student themselves because students have to attend many classes, many online classes. And so normally we go into the normal working hours, but there are classes that we conduct over weekend, over the night as well. Depends on, because some students during this pandemic they do jobs as well. I mean, so we need to adjust that in the situation as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think much depends on how interactive it is. You know, I remember listening to a lecturer drone on for 90 minutes and we're all asleep in the back. But somebody could be offering something of the same length with lots of illustrations and lots of, animation and what have you. And the time just passes. So there we have it.
And furthermore, actually, all the teaching is recorded, and they can view it later on. Yeah.
Okay, that's wonderful. All right, so let's turn to these practical, implementable solutions on any topic that you choose. Teacher Zaliza, please let me start with you. What would you like to leave our audience with in terms of something practical?
To sum up some of the points that I've shared just now, I think one of the implementable keywords that we can take is private education should be empowered. The school should be given autonomy. The private preschools and all should be given autonomy, not subject to a blanket announcement, the same, as all, because we are talking about two segments here. That is business, industry that we have to drive, as well as education. Just for your information, preschool teachers, in fact, in the category of MITI, is put under something like factory labor, which is it's not something that is seen as as really high up there, as important. So, sometimes this kind of thing, we need the public, the government, all to be aware of how important, and come to the next point of implementable, that is essential to empower and then to see it as essential. So if we want to talk about technology and how we can contribute more, for the country and all that, we have to look at this very basic thing, that is to receive a basic education. The name itself is basic, right? To be seen as essential service and to empower. Thank you.
That's a wonderful point. Thank you so much for making that. Encik Amir, how would you like to summarize, just in a couple of minutes, an implementable solution that you would like to leave our audience with? I think you need to unmute yourself, sir. Have we lost you?
Okay.
Oh.
Okay, Liz. The last one I want to highlight on, this is not we discussed before in this forum, but I would like to raise the issues of the access of our students to higher education. For record, in 2018, our access to higher education is 45.1% compared to some other neighboring countries like South Korea, 94.3%, Hong Kong, 76.9%, but we are only 45.1%. I believe last year the rate should be lower than this. It comes to something that I would like to suggest. There are a lot of students that want to further their studies, but due to this pandemic, they might not be able to further their studies because of the financial issues. I mean, their family, their parents doesn't have enough fund to go to private higher education for higher education. So we would like to suggest the government look seriously into providing this support facilitation to the student, especially the B40 students, and create a strategic program to make sure our access to higher education should not drop too low compared to the neighboring countries, or at least because our projection to be negara maju, should have more percentage of students in the higher education. So that's, I think, something that I want to highlight.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Last and certainly not least, Mr. Muhammad Ali, what are you leaving us with today? A couple of minutes, please.
Sure. The word that has been shared, empowerment of private sector, is very important. I think it's a key word. And I would like to have a cautious word over here, because unfortunately, we can see a lot of policies that somehow the government will put in it's not holistic, right? It's always up the top. So I believe that after everything goes back to normal, there will be some changes, which is mean that there will be some blended learning, hybrid kind of learnings and so on. So government will possibly make policy towards that. But I would like to urge the government to look holistically. They cannot only, make a policy for education institutions to have a blended, which is mean that some students will stay at home or not in the school to study. So they also have to make the policy for the workforce, because they also allow the workforce also to have a policy to work from home, whichever who can. Because if they make a policy, education institutions to do work from home or distant learning, and whereas their parents is actually working, this will cause an issue, because in Malaysia, parents send their kids to school, a tertiary education is not only to give them, a kind of education, but also as a kind of somebody they care kind of things, either your school and so on. Like now we are seeing the challenges whenever they allow 60% of the workforce to go to work, and then you have children in a home that going through these online educations. There is a challenge for these parents to have. So whatever policy they're going to make, it must be holistic, that education sector, economic sector, everything should bind into that same thing. If education can go online, learn from home, work also should be able to go online and from home. Then you see synergy, and you are not creating other challenges unnecessarily. That's all, please.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. So everyone, much food for thought, and I think for further discussion. Sadly, we've run out of time. Thank you to everyone for sending in the questions. But most of all, I would deeply thank our three panelists who have given us such interesting ideas. They've engaged and informed us so eloquently. So thank you so much, Encik Muhammad Ali, Encik Amir Hamza, sorry, the first time I got that wrong, I'm annoyed with myself, and teacher Zaliza Alias. And last but certainly not least, I'd like to give a big round of virtual applause to the MIGHT team in the background, to Asmil, Shri, Widias, Zeti, Farah, and anybody else that I haven't included for the smooth running of our webinar today. So thank you. Please look out for further details of future MIGHT Road to Recovery webinar series. And now all that remains for me to say is terima kasih, selamat tinggal, dan jaga semua. Goodbye. Oh, love that. Farah, are you coming back in?
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you, Dr. Liz. Thank you, Mr. Muhammad Ali. Thank you, Mr. Hamza and Teacher Zaliza for such an insightful discussion today. We had over 100 people joining us. And yes, we hope it has been very beneficial to everyone. If you have colleagues or friends who couldn't join us this morning, they can rewatch the webinar on my YouTube channel.